top 10 groups to become homeless if America collapses, predictions for 2025. There was a time when the American dream was not just a phrase, it was a promise, a land where effort met opportunity, where stability seemed one job, one degree, or one good breakaway. But what happens when the very ground that dream stands on begins to crack? As inflation quietly eats away at your paycheck, as rent becomes unreachable, and as basic healthcare turns into a luxury, we are beginning to ask hard questions. If the system breaks, who breaks first? And here lies a truth we can no longer ignore. Even those who once seemed safest graduates, working families, veterans may find themselves one crisis away from the streets. In today's video from The Journey of Wisdom, we take a sobering look at the 10 groups most at risk of becoming homeless if the United States faces a full-blown economic collapse. This isn't fear-mongering. This is a deep dive into expert predictions, verified data, and honest insights about what could happen and how close many already are. Let's begin. Number 1. Freelancers and gig workers. Freelancers and gig workers may symbolize freedom and flexibility in the modern economy, but beneath the surface lies a much more precarious reality, one that places them among the most vulnerable if America were to face a major collapse in 2025. These individuals are often celebrated for carving their own paths, working without a boss, unchained from a traditional office. They build careers in writing, graphic design, programming, video editing, and other creative or technical fields, often thriving in digital spaces. But their independence also comes at a price. They are their own managers, marketers, accountants, and problem solvers. And when the system around them begins to shake, their safety nets are often too thin, completely non-existent. The COVID-19 pandemic in 2020 provided a harsh glimpse into this reality. As businesses shuttered and contracts disappeared, millions of freelancers were left scrambling. For the first time, the US government had to roll out emergency unemployment assistance specifically for self-employed workers. Yet, once the immediate crisis passed, many of those temporary supports vanished, leaving freelancers in the same exposed position as before without employer-provided health insurance, paid sick leave, job security, or guaranteed income. The harsh truth is that in an economic collapse, freelancers are likely to be among the first to lose income. Without steady contracts or timely payments, many could fall behind on rent or mortgage, lose access to tools required for their trade, or worse, be pushed into homelessness. And with cost of living increases outpacing the rates paid for freelance work, many are forced to take on more gigs just to maintain the same standard of living, often with reduced pay. Take, for example, a freelance designer in Los Angeles who used to earn $6,000 a month to live comfortably. Post-pandemic, her income dropped to below $2,000, not even enough to cover rent. She had to move in with 3 strangers to make ends meet. That's not just a story, it's a warning. And it's not just about financial hardship, it's about how a lack of structural support can turn hard-working, capable individuals into economic casualties. If we're going to talk about resilience in the face of national crisis, then we must also talk about reform. It's time for policymakers to recognize that the gig economy is not a fringe movement, it's a foundational part of today's labor force. We need social safety nets tailored to freelancers, systems for accessible microloans, realistic unemployment insurance options, scalable health coverage, and financial education programs. Freelancers need tools not just to survive, but to protect themselves against exploitation and economic instability. For those of us in this space, or those considering it, the message is clear. Embrace the freedom, yes, but prepare for the responsibility. Learn how to price your work fairly, Build emergency savings, even if it's slow going, and advocate for your rights as a worker. Because in a fragile economy, your survival may depend not just on your skills, but on your readiness to face unpredictability head-on. Number 2. Single parents. Let's take a moment to talk directly about one of the most vulnerable yet most courageous groups of people in our society: single parents. If you're raising a child on your own, you already know this isn't just about survival. It's about showing up every day, rain or shine, giving everything you have to make life just a little better for your child. Picture this: you're up before sunrise, getting your child ready for school, then off to your shift at a store, a cafe, or maybe cleaning offices. You get home exhausted, cook dinner, help with homework, and after your child finally sleeps, you sit down with an old computer, budgeting every penny to stretch a too small paycheck into another month of rent, food, and tuition. This isn't fiction. This is the reality for over 11 million single parents in the US, according to the Census Bureau, and more than 80% of them are mothers. Many live below the poverty line, and even those who don't often hover just above it, one small crisis away from disaster. Now think about this. What happens when there's no safety net? No co-parent, no savings, no relatives you can count on? What happens when the rent goes up by just $200? Or when a child needs urgent medicine or a new pair of glasses? For single-parent families, there is no room for error. They are the breadwinner and the caregiver, the emotional anchor and the emergency responder, all rolled into one. In a country where wages have stayed flat, while housing and food prices rise dramatically 20 to 30% over just the last 2 years, these parents are balancing on a tightrope with no safety net below. If the American economy were to collapse in 2025, many of these families wouldn't just be struggling, they'd be pushed over the edge into homelessness. Ask yourself this: how would anyone hold it all together under that kind of pressure? And here's where it becomes not just a personal struggle, but a societal responsibility. Because while single parents fight every day for their kids, the system often fails them. There aren't enough shelters. Emergency aid is full of red tape. Assistance programs turn people away for being just a few dollars too rich, ignoring the fact that poverty isn't just about numbers, it's about reality. What if, instead of patching problems when they break, we created systems to prevent the break in the first place? What if emergency housing assistance was quick, flexible, and designed to actually meet people where they are? What if food and medical aid came without humiliation, delay, or paperwork designed to confuse? So, if you're listening to this as a single parent, know this: your strength is not invisible. Your efforts matter more than you're often told, but your struggle shouldn't be this hard. And if you're someone who wants to help, start by supporting policies that protect these families before they hit rock bottom. Reach out in your community, offer time, resources, or even just understanding. Because the real lesson here is that no one should have to carry the weight of the world alone, especially when they're carrying it for their children. What kind of world do we want to build for them? Number 3. Service industry workers. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you stopped to really notice the person who handed you your morning coffee, scanned your groceries, or cleaned the hotel room you just checked out of? These are the workers we see every day, often with a smile, always moving, always helping. They are cashiers, servers, cooks, cleaners, hotel staff people who keep things running quietly in the background. But behind those uniforms and customer service smiles, many of them are barely holding on. And if America slips into a full-blown economic collapse in 2025, they could be among the first to lose everything, including the roof over their heads. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, around 60 million Americans are in the service industry, and most of them earn under $15 an hour. That's not even enough to cover rent in many cities today, let alone in a time of crisis. They often work 2 or 3 jobs just to survive. No benefits, no paid sick days, and no contracts to guarantee their hours or protect their future. Now think about what happens when the economy gets tight. People stop eating out, hotels empty, grocery stores cut hours and staff. These are the first jobs to go because they rely on customer spending, and when spending slows down, so do their paychecks until there's nothing left. What happens next? No savings to fall back on, no health insurance to cover emergencies, no unemployment benefits in many cases. Just rent that's due, food that needs to be bought, and families that need to be cared for. Some workers might crash on a friend's couch, others may live in their cars, and some, heartbreakingly, could end up on the street with their children, simply because their honest, hard work is not valued the way it should be. That's the part that hurts most. These are the people who take care of us every single day. They serve our meals, they clean our spaces, they smile through exhaustion just to make someone else's day easier. But when they need support, society looks the other way. And it makes me wonder, if the people who show up for us day in and day out can lose everything so quickly, then who really is safe? So here's the real question for all of us. What kind of system have we built where those who serve others the most are protected the least? It's time to start demanding more, not just for ourselves, but for the people we depend on every single day. Service industry workers deserve more than just survival. They deserve security, dignity, and a future they can rely on. Because a society that turns its back on its hardest workers is a society on the brink of losing its own humanity. Still with us? That means you understand how real the risk is and how important it is to be informed. Drop "prepared mindset" in the comments to let others know you're thinking ahead. And don't miss the final insights. They could be the key to staying off that list if America faces a collapse. Number 4. Immigrants. They arrive on American soil carrying nothing but hope and a deep longing to build something better, not just for themselves, but for their families and future generations. Often leaving behind countries marked by poverty, violence, or limited opportunity, these individuals step into America ready to work, often in the toughest and most underappreciated roles, tending crops under the blazing sun, cleaning skyscraper offices after dark, nursing our elderly with tenderness, and raising children not their own. Yet, in times of economic collapse, it is those whose hands have quietly built the foundation of so many American lives who find themselves most vulnerable. The recession does not just strip away their income, it robs them of stability, dignity, and a voice. As one immigrant family in Los Angeles shared, 3 months without a job, and we were sleeping in our car. No papers, no help, no hope. We had to be quiet. We just waited for each day to end. Their story is not an isolated one. It echoes in every state, in every silent corner where fear lives. The American dream, once a beacon, is becoming brittle, cracking under the weight of rising costs, limited access, and systemic neglect. Homelessness for immigrants is no longer a distant risk, it is an urgent, unfolding reality. And yet, there is a path forward, one that honors the contributions of immigrants, not with pity, but with policy. As the Buddha once said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." This truth applies universally. It is time to recognize the humanity and resilience of immigrant communities. Though the path is challenging, America still has both the opportunity and the responsibility to stand by the immigrants who help build the very foundation of this nation. Humanitarian coverage, particularly for children, should never be contingent on legal status. Long-term workers with clean records deserve a path to legalization, allowing them access to the basic security of healthcare and social benefits. Beyond that, job retraining and career transition programs would allow immigrant workers to pivot out of unstable industries, preparing them to thrive rather than merely survive. Their adaptability and work ethic, if supported, can become one of the engines of post-crisis recovery. As economist Paul Romer once observed, "A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. If America is to rebuild itself in the face of collapse, it must begin by safeguarding those who have quietly supported it all along." In modern life, where uncertainty grows and systems show cracks, the most vulnerable should be our priority, not our afterthought. For those listening today, whether you are an immigrant, a policymaker, or someone simply trying to understand, know this: compassion is not weakness, it is wisdom in action. The future of a nation is not written by how it treats its wealthy during prosperity, but how it protects its most fragile during hardship. So let us choose to see clearly, act justly, and extend a hand where silence has lingered too long. Number 5. Former industrial workers. Let's take a moment to talk about a group of people who built the very foundation of modern America: former industrial workers. Maybe you know someone like this, or maybe you are someone who spent years, even decades, working in a factory, proud to contribute to something bigger than yourself. Cities like Detroit, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, and Gary were once filled with the sound of machines, shifts that ran deep into the night, and people whose work literally kept the country moving. Back then, a factory job meant stability, pride, and the ability to raise a family. But things changed. Jobs were outsourced, machines got smarter, and over 5 million manufacturing positions vanished since the year 2000. Suddenly, the towns that symbolized American strength were silenced, and the people who gave their lives to those industries were left behind, often without warning or support. One man, a 58-year-old who once worked proudly at a Pittsburgh steel mill, now makes just $12 an hour in a part-time job, not even enough to afford a modest apartment. How do you go from earning a living wage and contributing to a vibrant local economy to wondering how you'll keep the lights on next month? And the heartbreak doesn't end with the paycheck. When the factory closed, it didn't just take jobs, it took away communities. Places where friends gathered after shifts at local diners, where schools thrived because families stayed and invested in their towns, are now marked by shuttered storefronts and for sale signs. The young people have left, chasing opportunities that no longer exist at home, while older residents sit quietly with memories of better days, watching their communities fade. Does this feel familiar to you? Have you seen your town change like this? Because if America enters another deep recession, these regions already bruised and battered will likely be hit hardest once again. The jobs that replaced factory work often don't come with benefits, stability, or even fair wages. Many have been forced to trade $30 an hour skilled labor for temporary gigs that barely pay the bills. But here's the truth. People like Mr. Frank and so many others are not disposable. They built the roads we drive on, the buildings we live in, the cars we use every day. They deserve more than to be forgotten. And while there's no instant fix, there are ways forward. Local job centers now offer free retraining programs for trades, healthcare, and technology pathways into careers that still offer stability. Communities can come together again through support groups, workshops, and local organizations determined not to give up on these towns. So let me ask you, what can you do to help keep these stories alive and these people on their feet? The message today is clear. Honor the work, restore the dignity, and help create real second chances. Because a strong America doesn't forget the hands that built it. Number 6. Veterans. Let's take a moment to reflect on a group of people who once stood on the front lines for this country of veterans. These are men and women who left behind their families, walked into danger, and made sacrifices that most of us can't fully grasp, all in the name of protecting our freedom and safety. Many returned home with visible injuries, while others carry invisible wounds like PTSD that never really heal. Yet despite their service, far too many veterans come back to a nation that quietly forgets them. According to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, over 35,000 American veterans are homeless on any given night, sleeping in shelters, in their cars, or on the streets of the very country they once served. Most of them are older, living with trauma, battling addiction, or simply unable to keep up with the skyrocketing costs of rent, food, and utilities. And here's the heartbreaking truth. Many can't work full-time jobs because of physical or psychological conditions, yet the benefits they receive often don't cover even the basics. So how do we let this happen? How do we allow the very people who put their lives on the line to be the first to suffer when the economy tightens? In a time when America is once again staring down the threat of recession and rising costs, veterans are especially at risk. They're not just statistics, they're real people, with names, stories, and families, many of whom are struggling in silence. Medical support systems meant to help them are overwhelmed, difficult to navigate, and sometimes just out of reach entirely. So, I want to ask you directly, you believe that someone who fought for this country should ever have to fight again just to survive at home? Because if we don't talk about this, if we don't act, that's exactly what's going to keep happening. And yet, there is hope. Organizations like the Department of Veterans Affairs and countless local non-profits are working hard to provide housing, therapy, financial aid, and job training, but they can't do it alone. Veterans need to know these resources exist, and they need support from everyday citizens who are willing to speak up, donate, volunteer, or even just listen. If you're a veteran listening to this, or if you know one, please know this: your service matters, and your well-being matters too. Reach out to the VA, find a local support network, or talk to someone you trust. You shouldn't have to face this battle alone. And if you're someone who's never worn a uniform but enjoys the peace and freedoms they fought for, ask yourself, what can you do to give something back? Because honoring veterans isn't just about waving a flag, it's about making sure they're never left behind. If you're still watching, you're already ahead of the curve. Most people ignore the warning signs, but not you. Type "aware and prepared" in the comments to lock in your mindset of resilience. Keep watching, because the next part may reveal exactly how to avoid being caught off guard if things take a turn in 2025. Number 7. The middle class. There was a time that long ago, and being middle class in America meant a sense of pride and stability. A home in the suburbs, a reliable car, summer vacations with the family, and the hope that your children would have it even better than you did. But today, that picture has changed drastically. If you're between 30 and 65, you've probably felt it too, how everything from groceries to gas to health insurance seems to be rising faster than your paycheck. According to recent data, over half of the Americans who used to identify as middle class can no longer maintain that status. The dream that once seemed so reachable now feels like a tightrope walk, where one unexpected event, whether it's a medical emergency, job loss, or sudden rent hike, can push an entire family to the edge. And in a scenario where the US economy collapses or falls into deep recession, the middle class could be one of the fastest groups to slip into homelessness, not because of laziness or poor decisions, but because the system no longer provides the buffer it once did. You may have done everything right, got an education, worked hard, paid taxes, saved where you could, and yet, for many, it's still not enough to guarantee security. More than 60% of middle-class families today don't have enough savings to get through just 3 months without income. That's a scary number. Mortgage payments, rising tuition costs, insurance, groceries, and utility bills are all going up, while wages are growing at a much slower pace. To cope, many are withdrawing from retirement accounts early, racking up credit card debt, or turning to buy now, pay later services just to meet their basic needs. The pressure is constant and relentless, and when the financial cushion disappears, what's left to catch the fall? We rarely talk about how emotionally exhausting it is to feel like you're slipping despite doing your best. There's a quiet pain in watching the dream you built slowly unravel, especially when you trusted the system to protect you. But here's the thing, you're not powerless. While we all wait for better policies and more equitable reforms, there are small but powerful actions you can take today. Start with an emergency fund, even if it's just $50 a month. Take advantage of free financial education programs like those offered by AARP to learn how to reduce spending or manage debt more effectively. Talk openly about money with your family. It's not a taboo, it's a survival tool. And remember, you are not alone in this. Millions are navigating the same storm, and together we can push back against the silence and rebuild some of that lost security. The American dream may feel fragile right now, but it's still worth fighting for, and you still have the strength to protect it. So let me ask you, what's one small step you can take today to guard your tomorrow? Number 8. Low, skilled, and temporary workers. Let's talk about a group of people you probably see every day but rarely think about: the low-skilled and temporary workers who quietly keep this country running. They're the ones cleaning corporate buildings late at night, working the grills at fast food restaurants, loading luggage at airports, or restocking shelves while most of us are asleep. These jobs may not require degrees or formal training, but they are vital, and for millions of Americans, they've been a lifeline. Over 20 million people across the US depend on this kind of work to survive, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yet most of them live paycheck to paycheck, with no health insurance, no retirement savings, and no financial cushion for emergencies. So ask yourself, what happens to them if the economy crashes in 2025? What happens when businesses downsize or close, and these jobs often considered the most expendable are cut first? The answer is sobering. They're left with nothing, no severance, no safety net, and in many cases, no way back in. We saw this in 2008, when over 70% of those who lost their jobs during the recession were low-skilled workers, and many of them never returned to steady employment again. Now the threat is even more complex, because it's not just about economic collapse, it's about technology replacing humans. Automation is moving fast, and AI doesn't need a lunch break or a raise. Machines are already handling tasks that used to employ thousands of people, and it's happening quietly in warehouses, hotels, restaurants, and retail chains. So the danger isn't just temporary, it could be permanent. And for those without savings, without access to new skills, and without family support, that's when homelessness becomes a terrifying reality. This isn't a story about laziness or lack of ambition. It's a story about a system that rewards the top while ignoring the bottom, even though the bottom holds everything up. So what can be done? First, we need serious investment in short-term vocational training programs that teach real-world skills like basic coding, automation maintenance, or healthcare support. These are the jobs of the future, and workers need the tools to adapt. Second, the federal minimum wage must rise to at least $18 per hour to match the real cost of living, because no one working full-time should still be drowning in poverty. Here's something to think about. If the hardest working people in our country are the first to fall, are we really building a future that includes everyone? And if not, what can you do, Heather, through your vote, your voice, or your support to make sure they're not left behind? Because a strong America isn't defined by how it treats its richest, but by how it protects its most vulnerable. Let's make sure we live in an America that doesn't forget the very people who keep it going. Number 9. The elderly. When we talk about homelessness, we often think of young people on hard times or families struggling to make ends meet, but rarely do we picture our elderly, the ones who've already spent decades working, contributing, and raising the very society we live in. Yet according to a 2023 HUD report, the number of people over 65 experiencing homelessness in the United States has more than doubled in just 10 years. That's not just a statistic, it's a wake-up call. These are folks who once worked on factory lines at places like Ford and GM, who taught in schools, staffed offices, and paid their taxes faithfully. They raised their kids believing that, if they just kept doing the right thing, retirement would bring peace and dignity. But now, many are facing a cruel twist of fate. Instead of enjoying their golden years, they're being forced into survival mode. According to the National Institute on Retirement Security, around 40% of seniors depend entirely on Social Security, which averages about $1,800 a month. That sounds like a lot until you consider that the average rent in the US has now surpassed $3,000. That leaves nothing for medication, utilities, food, or any kind of quality of life. How can someone who worked their whole life be faced with a choice between paying for medicine or groceries? The truth is, Social Security was never designed to be the only lifeline. It replaces only about 40% of your pre-retirement income, when in reality, experts say you need 70% or more to maintain basic security. And with people living longer and healthcare costs going up every year, even those who saved are finding their nest eggs stretched thin. But here's where it gets even more urgent if the economy crashes. If the government slashes funding in the face of a recession, seniors will likely be among the first to feel it. They can't pick up side jobs. They can't hustle their way out of poverty. Their bodies and minds need rest, not more stress. And yet, in states like California and Arizona, we are seeing heartbreaking scenes of elderly Americans living in their cars, camping in tents outside parking lots, or lining up outside shelters just to have a roof over their heads. Not because they didn't try, but because they couldn't outrun an economy that punishes the most vulnerable. So here's the real question. Can we still call ourselves a compassionate, developed society if we allow our elders, the ones who built the foundation of our country, to spend their final years in fear, isolation, and instability? If you're listening to this and thinking, what can I do? Start by having conversations. Talk with your parents, your neighbors, your community about the importance of retirement planning, yes, but also about advocating for stronger protections. Donate to programs that provide housing and healthcare for seniors. And most of all, don't let this issue stay invisible, because how we care for the elderly says everything about who we are and who we're becoming. Number 10. Young adults with student debt. Let's talk honestly about something that affects millions of young Americans today: student debt, and why this group, despite being full of potential, might be one of the first to face homelessness if America experiences an economic collapse in 2025. If you're between 30 and 65, chances are your own college years looked very different. A part-time job might have covered your tuition, rent, and maybe even left you with a little extra. But for your kids or grandkids, the world they're navigating is far more unforgiving. College has become almost non-negotiable, pushed as the only path to success, yet the cost of that path is higher than ever before financially and emotionally. These young adults sign massive loan agreements before they even start their careers, often without fully understanding the long-term consequences. By the time they graduate, they're staring down debts of $40,000, $60,000 or more while working entry-level jobs that barely pay above minimum wage. And according to the US Department of Education, as of 2024, student debt has surpassed $1.77 trillion with no signs of slowing down. Now, let's connect that to the bigger picture. If the economy crashes, these young borrowers have nothing to fall back on. No assets, no home equity, no savings, just debt that doesn't go away. And because many of them are newer hires or working in unstable gig jobs, they're usually the first to get laid off. Then the choice becomes brutally simple: pay off the loans or pay for a place to live. And when the paycheck disappears, so does the roof over their head. That's when we see the hidden crisis begin. Young people living out of their cars, crashing on friends' couches, or quietly slipping into shelters, not because they're lazy or irresponsible, but because they were set up to fail in a system that promised opportunity and delivered debt. Think about that for a second. How do we expect a generation to thrive when the financial rules are stacked against them from the start? And what's even more painful is that these are smart, motivated individuals who want to contribute, who believe in building something for themselves, but they're forced to choose survival over dreams. The system isn't broken, it was designed this way. So what can we do, especially if we're from an older generation who's seen both prosperity and hardship? Start by sharing your financial wisdom. Talk to your children and grandchildren about budgeting, savings, and realistic college choices. Encourage them to explore programs like public service loan forgiveness, or help them find free counseling on debt management. And above all, don't judge them, support them. Because if we let our youngest fall, what kind of future are we really protecting? The lesson here is simple. Opportunity means little if it comes with chains. Let's be the ones who break them together. And so, as we've seen today, the face of homelessness is changing. No longer distant, no longer invisible. It's the freelancer at your coffee shop, the veteran down the street, the student with a dream, or the parent working double shifts. These are not strangers. These are our neighbors, our loved ones, and sometimes even us. If America faces collapse, it won't just be about numbers or policies, it will be about people, real lives, real struggles. And now, more than ever, we must ask ourselves, what kind of society do we want to be when the storm comes? At The Journey of Wisdom, we believe that awareness is the first step to compassion, and that compassion must lead to action. If this video moved you or opened your eyes in some way, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos. We'll continue to explore the deeper truths of our world, guided by wisdom, clarity, and the hope for a more just future. Until next time, stay mindful, stay kind, and keep walking the journey of wisdom.